Okay, let's do the next part to the Mario mushroom, and that is going to be um, fixing the timers so that it works and that the score. So what we're going to do is we did some initialization here at the timer and the score, and then by the way, at the very end we'll talk about this freeze. But we have initialize. We set the score to zero, the timer to zero, and display both those on labels. We also do that when we're doing reset. Score is zero, timer is 10. But right now we don't have the timer. Well, actually, the timer does click down, but it's only, well, it does click down. What we want to do is have it stop at zero, because as of right now, it's going to go to negative. Now, good news is we did this before, and we did this with the timer app. Let me remind you what we do. We need an if then else, and oops. So I could start with that, and then adding the else by doing this, or I could have, and I just never do this. I could have just grabbed an if then else, but I always like to just start simple and add what I need. What we're going to do is if the time is greater than zero, um, if the time is greater than zero, and remember this is a drop down menu, so we'll do, oops, can you hear my neighbors talk again? Seems like as soon as I start recording, that dog goes nuts. Maybe he hears my voice. So if the timer is greater than zero, and we don't want greater than or equal, we want greater than zero. And the reason is that means if it's equal to zero, we don't want it to be doing this. And what do I mean by doing this? This minus one. Okay. So every time the clock ticks, and remember, it has to be set to true, which happens when we hit the up, down, left, right button. If it's true, it starts doing this, and what it does is it checks to see that the timer is still above zero, It hasn't reached zero yet. You subtract one and put that new number in there. So what we're going to do then on the else is we're going to, oops, wrong one there. I need the clock. We're going to set the clock enabled to zero. I mean, not to zero, to false. And remember, the false is here in the logic area. So remember what this does. Timer enabled equals false is just turning the clock off. And then we're going to, at this point, add this new variable and set the freeze to 1. And let me give you a quick idea of what this is. The freeze is up here. It's initialized as 0. And what we're going to do is once you get the timer down to 0, we're going to change the freeze from 0 to 1. The reason it's what this does is it gives us an indicator. All freeze does is tell us if the timer is at 0 or not. If the timer is above 0, freeze is at 0. If the timer is at 0, freeze turns to 1. Now, I could have done those in a different way. It doesn't really matter, but the idea is that this thing changes. Remember the concept of the red folder? The number in there changes from one thing to another. And what we're going to use this for is, the reason I call it freeze, is it's going to freeze the score. Because as it is right now, even though the clock timer would stop, you could keep going to keep hitting the mushroom and score. What we're going to do is come over to the collision, which is right below here. And then we're going to add something in that says that not only will the mushroom sprite move, but we're going to increase the score by 1, but only if the freeze is at 0. So I'll put that together in the next video. We'll stop right here. Make sure you can get the timer working here, and we'll go from there.